Messieurs, Mesdames, bonjour. Here you feel that we need Alex Weber's system to interpret for us. So welcome back to this afternoon session. I'm going to take you through some of the activities we have been conducting within the ELRC, this European Language Resource Coordination Program, and my fellow partners later on will update you with other aspects. I will focus here on the data aspect. And I think we have seen from these morning talks that the key word in this area is data, data, and data. We understood that the whole technology today is what we call data-driven paradigm-based. We need to train the MT systems so they can learn from existing data. And of course, the focus of this particular program on the ELRC languages, that's the European Union. We still count 24, plus Icelandic and Norwegian. And of course, we would like this data to be convenient to represent the DSI, these digital infrastructures that have been listed extensively this morning by Alexandra. So we realize during this first part of the project that data is to be produced through the documents that many of you are drafting, and the data that is also produced during the translation processes. And that's why we had this series of workshops around Europe to try and convince the people to contribute with the data. And we are still looking for data, what you have or what you can point to. Our goal, as I said, is at the end of this program, and you have seen that a number of calls are coming out from the CF program, is to collect language resources that would facilitate the customization of the CF automated translation that is now called CF e-translation, and to make it compliant with the requirement of the digital service infrastructures. We will see a few of them during the day, but you have already saw the list. The approach that we adopted within the program is to organize this journey across Europe. I hope that some of you attended the workshops that we organized since October 2015. If you missed that, there is at least one coming soon. That's Iceland in the 11th of November for those who want to have a short trip to Reykjavik. Otherwise, the publications are on the website I list here. We try to compile a report on each workshop, but also to make available the slides whenever possible. The idea during this workshop was to discuss how we could set up a kind of pipeline. Yeah, someone is, yeah. So the idea was to discuss with the participants how to set up a pipeline between the various potential contributors and the ELRC, and then between ELRC and the European Commission, and in particular DGT, to make sure that a sustainable pipeline is set up to deliver data over time. And one of the practical goals of the project is to deliver at least 200 language resources for this customization. You remember that during the workshops, we insisted very much about the kind of resources we wanted to get from aligned parallel corpora, things coming from translation systems, translation memories coming from your CAT tools, but also any comparable corpora, monolingual corpora, lexicographical data, thesaurus, whatever. Any donations you have in mind are more than welcome. The two basic phases of this action were this definition of the data collection process. We tried to understand what are the expectations of the European Commission and DGT, and for that we drafted a plan for data collection, working closely with our NAPs, with the national anchor points. And we tried to figure out what are the issues that would hinder the delivery of such data, and I will go through some of these later on. In many countries, we managed to get agreement with some providers once we have decided what are the data profiles we were looking for, as I mentioned. The second phase of this period was to set up a repository of data that is hosted at ILSP in Athens. And the idea of this repository is to be hosting all the data that can be contributed. And we decided to have a number of user profiles, so to allow people to browse the data, but also to manipulate the data in some cases. The basic elements being the metadata that we asked our contributors to help us with. So that was the first period. The second period is this active data collection period that started after the series of workshops, and that will go till the next April, which is the end of this first program. We try to organize regular teleconferences with the national players. I hope that some of you already attended some of these meetings. We also try to have bilateral discussion with with representatives from each country. In some cases, we understood that some data providers would need to get letters of support or a letter of mandate to carry such task, and we discussed with the European Commission, and they are willing to deliver such or to draft such a letter. Some of you already got one. If you think that we need to write something to better explain all these issues to a high management in the government, please let us know and we will do that. Recently, our coordinator, the FKI, also decided that we do have some funding to spend on repurposing or repackaging some of the resources that you have identified, and a number of contracts have been signed, at least one per country. If you are aware of resources that require such packaging and that require some manpower, please get in touch with us and we will see how to draft a contract for that. As I said, we designed the work through a number of geographical areas, and here you see the countries and the associated responsible. You can think of this as north, southwest, southeast in geographical terms. The DFKI people are in charge of the general coordination and subcontracting. So for any issue that pop out, please feel free to talk to any of us, primarily to your contact, but I'm sure that all of us are available to support you. Once again, what we are looking for, and we are still looking for that, is the donations of archived data that are in digital format, and primarily translation memories, but any documents in bilingual or multilingual setting would be very important. If you don't have such data, but you can identify sources, please let us know. We can also discuss with them directly if necessary. Now about the delivery process. Of course, we are willing and prepared to store the data that you are trusting us with. This is what we call the raw data from all different scenarios, whether we get translation memories or documents to align. We upload them to one of these repositories that we call ELRC Share, that I will describe briefly afterwards. The next step would be to deliver this to DGT. And as you understood this morning, we are trying to go beyond that and also support the research and industry communities, and trying to make sure that they have access to the data whenever the licenses or the conditions behind the data allow such thing. So if, for instance, we get something that is compliant with PSI, with public sector initiative, which means that it should be made available for research and for commercial use. We will make sure that the commercial players who want to develop the next generation of machine translation and other associated tools get access to that. If the license, for a number of reasons, is restricted and you are only allowing us to deliver a copy to the European Commission, then we will do so. An important feature I would like to stress here is whatever happened, the data remains yours. You're just sharing copies with us, and we will process the data in a way that it becomes useful for those who are interested in machine translation and translation tools. So I can imagine that a donation of, let's say, French-Portuguese data donated by a French agency could be also useful for some translation services in Portugal. You don't have to use a machine translation system to get access to the data. You're welcome to use it in your own workflow. So I said that the consortium set up a portal where we do have the repository of data. If you go to the portal lr-coordination.eu, you will see that we have something called resources here. And in order to either browse the resources or donate the resources, either you just browse and then you don't need to do anything, or you want to register and then you can see more details, but also contribute data. In this ELRC repository, we defined a large number of user profiles. I listed them here very quickly, just to show that if you are a registered user, you can upload data yourself, and you can also help us with this metadata description of the resources. Where do we stand today? This morning, I think Joseph and Ginabit showed us a very huge list of resources that I tried to copy here. Then I looked, we have this very nice expression in a number of languages, is the glass half full or half empty? I just tried to look in Wikipedia and realized that this expression appears only in 4 or 5 languages. So maybe we are too optimistic about that. So this is the list. We have over almost 120 resources today. They are in different categories. This is 3 categories that we adopted. Either internal, which means that we are still working on the data and we will release that later. Ingested, it means that the description is finalized and that we are just looking at some final checks like legal aspect, or they are published, which means that they are already usable by the European Commission and by a number of partners who are willing to do that when the metadata is complete and all the legal aspects are cleared. So you see that statistics show that only 25 out of these 120 are published. This is the resources that are already on the repository. It doesn't mean that this is all what we have. Some of you already mentioned that they are collecting data on some national basis and they will be donating this later on. We hope to get this as soon as possible. The typology of the resources we have, we look at the typology and we try to categorize this. You see that most of the data in this reddish part is bilingual or multilingual resources. Corpora that have more than 1 language, 81 out of 120. We do have monolingual corpora, which is also important in machine translation customization. And we have a number of lexicon and other language description. The next slide is something I tried to hide, but let's look at that very, very quickly. I tried to look at the countries that are donating more resources than others. And don't take it seriously, since many resources are still in the pipeline. But all in all, you see that there is a lot of black countries. This is the countries where many resources have been identified. Many are still under packaging or under clearing. But we see that a lot of countries are missing from our portfolio, and we hope that this will change very, very quickly. The licensing aspect, Prodromos this morning elaborated on the importance of this PSI directive. And here when we asked people what kind of licenses they would like the data to be proposed and shared under, a lot are undecided, which means that very often they are questioning whether the national license, which has been drafted in many countries, is the one eligible, or some adopted a very permissive licenses like Creative Commons, as we see here. So, and the review here means that, like in the case of Netherlands, for instance, the data in the Dutch regulations, if I got it right, the data is de facto available. You don't need to sign any license, while in some countries like France, we have the open government license in UK and in other countries. But here, again, the under review licenses, most of them are PSI compliant. The DSIs, this is a very tricky thing. When people donate data, we try to see whether it's related to e-justice, Europeana, the social security, etc. It's very difficult to decide, and you see that most of the data is qualified as other. The languages, no need for me to go into detail. We have seen a little bit of that. Let me go one step back and share with you what we hear from the different players when it comes to the challenges that prevent sharing data. We try to categorize this as legal issues, technical issues, administrative, and other. The legal issues, we saw already the details. Most of the data that we are looking for are data coming from the public sector, and they should be available under no restriction. This is the way the directive has been transposed in most of the countries. If you do have legal or licensing questions or issues, please talk to us. We have lawyers. You don't have to pay them for this kind of services. We do. And we can ask them when it comes to this legal aspect. For the technical issues, in some cases, we are talking about how to digitalize the data or how to export it from your translation tools or translation workflow. We are very happy to help, but I'm sure that most of you know how to export TMXs and the like. If the data is, as I said, Word files or PDF files that are readable, we can help with some of this preparation. One of the technical issues that pop up quite regularly is the anonymization. Many data producers remind us that some of these resources contain very sensitive data. And again, the issues were discussed in the legal session this morning. If you feel that we can anonymize because this is a kind of formatted data, it's quite easy, and we have the experts, and you will hear from Piers Wigenboom in the panel later on a little bit about this. But if we cannot, we leave this out as suggested. But again, the help desk is here to assist you with this. Another issue is the administrative aspects. Who is supposed to give the clearance per country in order to release the public data? Our understanding is that PSI is de facto applicable because all the countries since 2015 have transposed the directive. So you don't need, if you are the owner of the data, you don't need any clearance from your administration. In some countries, you have just to choose the license and get it released. Now we understand that in some departments, divisions, the relationship with the other colleagues or the managers is very specific, and you have to discuss this case by case. Some of you already argued that they need letters of support, either from the European Commission, DGT, or from DG Connect, or even from a higher level. Please let us know. If someone is reluctant to release the data in your administration because they didn't get the right letter from the European Commission, we would be happy to assist and mediate and help with that. My last slide is about some of the things that we identify as an issue in our workshops during these 30 workshops we organized, is about the data management plan. Very often we realize that because people are working under pressure of time, of money, some of the issues that we realize as important haven't been discussed. One of these is about the sustainability of the data that you are outsourcing to LSPs. Very often they would argue that they only give you the PDF and they don't give you the TMXs or the terminology or whatever. I think it's really important that you negotiate in advance to get this data management plan in place and gather all the outcomes and side effect of your subcontract. I think we all understood that the issue is really beyond the project, beyond the program. It's how to make the European Union, I wouldn't say multilingual. What we would like to make it is monolingual. I would like to go to Germany and keep speaking French and interacting with the German administration, or go to Iceland and speak French and understood by some of the officials. That's really the issue. And for that, we see that it's important for this language resource pipeline to be set up and work between the member state and the European Union. We realize that we have very motivated people for using MT and very reluctant people. Again, you don't have to use it. I think the choice is yours. Once it's there, you can decide to use it or not. You can decide to use it for a category of documents. You can think of it as a tool like many others. So this is really yours. The role of translators, I borrowed a slide from Kimo Rossi, but I think we said so many things about the role of language professionals, how the work is changing today. I think this is now a common understanding. I don't think that there is a very strong controversy between those who argue that machines will replace translators or that translators will get out of the job. So I just skip that slide, and thank you for your attention. Thank you very much. I'm happy to take questions if you have some. Otherwise, we have this panel discussion later on if you feel more comfortable with that. But I'm happy to take questions.